You're with Julian on the Brown Notes and a review of For Many the Album of the Year, which puts me in an interesting place. So Charlotte Emma Atchison, aka Charli XCX, and her album BRAT. Now, if there's one thing I've railed against in the modern era when it comes to the worst period for music criticism in my lifetime, it's been this relentless push to elevate mediocre female solo acts across R&B, pop and rap as being these titanic artistic forces with the album of the year every year, with its epicenter at Pitchfork. Probably the most watched thing on this channel was the bit I did earlier in the year about the collapse of Pitchfork, and it is so painful. Now, I'm fair with music. If something's great, I will say it's great. And if you say I'm an old man that doesn't give these women credit, my album of the year last year was Lana Del Rey, and my joint album of the year before was Rosalia. So actually, no. And I've got about 20 years of radio shows celebrating female singer-songwriters. But don't tell me that something that is mid-tier is outstanding. And I did even mention the Caroline Polachek album, which was last year's version of Charli XCX's BRAT, as being an incredibly mid-tier album. I gave something like 4 out of 10 to. I thought it was garbage. The problem I have is when you tell me that both the Caroline Polachek album and the Charli XCX album are equal, then I know you're full of shit, because it's quite clear the gulf between those two albums to me. They're not equally as good. It's garbage. Fetch the Bolt Cutters isn't as good as NFR by Lana Del Rey. Don't tell me that a 6 out of 10 is a 10 out of 10. So I found myself finally dipping into the music of Charli XCX after, like with Lana a bit, rejecting her for many years, because every time I dipped my toe in, I actually thought that it was crap. And they've been trying to promote her as this future pop artist for about 15 years now, and I just never found anything that interesting in her music. And when I watched the Coachella performance, I just didn't see anything there of interest. But this album has got enormous attention. It's her 6th studio album called BRAT, and BRAT Summer is one of the cultural crosswords of the year. So what did I think of it? Like I said, I'm always fair. So it opens with 360. There's an interesting bookend actually with 360 and 365, which I really appreciate, and it's clear that she's gone to great lengths to sculpt an album here and not chased pop glory. A lot of rap albums that come out now are 27 tracks long, have multiple features, have no flow, and exist for 1 or 2 big tracks. It's quite clear that she's not chased anything here. She's been squirreled away trying to present the perfect modern pop album, and to a degree she has done. So the minimalist soundscape, I've had a problem with a lot of modern music which I feel like is designed to be listened to on very poor playback equipment, like earbuds, like laptop speakers, and you hear a lot of pop and R&B where there are a couple of elements, and there's also this TikTok thing where they will have 30 seconds of a song just repeated and not much else to it. She puts herself in that world, but does so as an absolute artist. So a lot of this album has minimal 2 or 3 main music elements which are immediately very successful. And the synth pads on the opener 360, the percussion and the bass synths, something that is superb throughout. And her declaration of ubiquity as well, I found almost analogous to rap music. Really seems to be, what was it? When you're in the mirror, you're looking at me. I thought it was very good. It's a very sort of bravado opener. There's a lot of influences on this album which sound like they're deliberate homages to people. I thought the second track, Club Classics, has got a chorus which is very much like DANCE from Justice, and some very deeply wobbly bass. These Sympathy is a Knife, very personal lyrics on this album. It's mostly one of the most existential albums you could get from a young woman, I think. She really does peel apart every aspect of her own life. It's an incredibly personal album lyrically. The lyrics do elevate this massively above dross like that Polachek album, which had cringe-inducing rhyme schemes. This is often the meter of her poetry and the very aware, one of the most self-aware albums I think I've heard in the modern era, to be honest. Up there with Lana, who does her, he suddenly had this rebirth. I mean, look at her last album, which was my album of the year. How self-aware that was, how in touch with herself that was. A bit like Grimes, I thought, on Sympathy for a Knife as well, which I imagine she's probably a big fan of Grimes, and rightly so. She fucked up marrying Elon Musk, but her music's been outstanding. I Might Say Something Stupid is a very sort of low-key ballad. Reminded me of Hobart Paving by St Etienne, look that one up. And about her personal relationship with fame as well. And some great, she's really got a knack for those vignette details, tights on the lawn chair. I thought it was fantastic. And her recognition of her place. I'm famous but not quite, perfect for the background. And she entangles herself in this back and forth monologue with herself about her position as an artist and how famous she is. The Talk Talk track I thought was, there's Hudson Mohawk on that one. A lot of interesting producers. I thought it had a bit of the Roger Sanchez, another Chance, heavy synth vibe going on. It's a little bit more of an ordinary track. Von Dutch isn't. It's a much stronger track. I thought that was fantastic. It's got this real sort of heavy synth, almost Daft Punky synth, and this beat that's very well programmed. And when it starts skipping at certain points, it's like really remains completely on point. The track Everything Is Romantic, very descriptive lyrics again. Jesus Christ on a plastic sign. There's quite a lot of avant-garde pop on this album. Rewind, another of the best songs on the album. Another interior monologue one. I thought So I had reminded me a bit of Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time. And she mentions Is It Okay to Cry in a manner that made me think, is this a tribute song to Sophie, the artist who tragically fell to her death in Greece a few years ago, but was a shadow over the entire decade's modern pop movement? You would imagine that Charli is very much impressed by the sound stages that Sophie managed to whip up. And that album, the one solo album, had a probable high point emotively of It's Okay to Cry. And I do believe, even though I don't know because I don't read up or watch anything, that maybe it is a tribute track to Sophie. Girl So Confusing, another very, very strong song. Got great strobing bass synth on it, vignette lyrics again. There's a lot of really good rhythmic pacing on the album. I love her speaking voice because when she's not singing, she's got this incredibly posh sounding English home counties accent, which is very attractive. I watched Maxine the other night. You ever see, I'm a big stan of Mia Goth, but when you hear her speaking in her English accent, that's something else. The track Apple I thought was a bit more ordinary too. There are probably maybe 3 or so tracks on the album that are ordinary, and I say that in the context of, is it the album of the year? I did think Apple. It did remind me a bit of the Remy Wolf album. That one, Back to Back, is just absolutely, might even be my favourite. B2B might be my favourite on there, on the whole album. It's absolutely fabulous. Tiny bit Crystal Castles, perhaps the best vocal hook. She does some good 3-minute symphonies on this album, which, like, most of the tracks are really short. I wouldn't mind some of them being longer. Like, she does really well with a 2.5-minute track. Very, very much post Pink Pantheress in that regard. I wouldn't mind some of the musical ideas, like they build up a good soundstage of synths and drums going off, just to have expanded more. Again, is it absolutely perfect? Mean Girls, I thought, was probably the third ordinary track. It does the ethos of the album a little bit too plainly and a bit too straight. So there's probably 3 ordinary tracks on the album. I think about it all the time. It's amazing. Her very, very straight face talking about if her life would become more meaningful, if she had a child, and is she running out of time, dealt incredibly straight-faced. Amazingly self-aware track. And the bookend 365 that it ends it on, so you've got this like 360 degree parameter at the start, which is like this never-ending all-around view, but then you get 365 days, which is the same thing, but in almost like one's in space and one's in time, which I thought was very intellectually stimulating. I liked it a lot. And I do wonder if she's a big Strokes fan, because there's some Meet Me in the Bathroom stuff going on here. It's a much better theme song for the album than Mean Girls, I thought. So overall, this is undoubtedly an outstanding album. Don't tell me that, you know, a lot of this 6 out of 10 stuff is as good as this. If you tell me this is fantastic, I'll listen to it, and it is fantastic. Probably 3 tracks maybe are a bit weak. And I wouldn't have minded some of them, like even that last track 365, it builds up a head of steam that I wouldn't have minded seeing going for another 3 or 4 minutes. Everything is in that 3-minute pocket, and this is quibbling, but it's a very easy 9 out of 10 for BRAT from Charli XCX. I don't think it would be my album of the year. I don't think it's faultless. The Needle Drop Guy gave it 10 out of 10. I don't know that you can really. That said, it will easily be in my top 10 albums of the year, and there are many tracks on it, probably 4 or 5, which are just completely outstanding, and it's very close to being a little bit better. But a 9 out of 10 for Charli XCX and BRAT.